Welcome to the Hoover Presidential Library Museum. I'm Tom Schwartz, the director, and I'm excited to launch the first in a series of programs dealing with World War I. The museum just opened the making of the great humanitarian, Herbert Hoover, and World War I, which you can see in the Quarton Gallery, and the Belgian village, located outside at the bottom of the hill from the Yellow House. The exhibit tells the story of how World War I changed the life of Bert and Lou Hoover from comfortable wealth to one of personal sacrifice and humanitarian service. From 1914 until his death in 1964, Herbert Hoover would serve without compensation, living off the money he earned as a mining engineer, and feeding more than 1.4 billion people. It all began with aiding Americans stranded in London in August 1914, and led to creating the first non-governmental organization, the Commission for Relief in Belgium, that fed roughly 10 million Belgians and French and German-occupied areas. The exhibit is underwritten by the Hoover Presidential Foundation that also helps support programs like this one. If you're not a member, I hope you'll consider joining by taking a membership application at their desk. That's just right outside these doors. I first met our speaker in my previous career with the state of Illinois in the creation of the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum. Darroch was hired by BRC Imagination Arts to assist with historical research and writing. Perhaps Darroch's most important contribution is his most hidden. It was Darroch who gathered and compiled all the battle casualties for the movie map, The Civil War in 4 Minutes. This is one of the highlights of the museum, and perhaps my favorite gallery. Because record keeping of such statistics was irregular, especially by the Confederacy, it was not an easy task. But Darroch was resourceful and dogged in determination. For those of you who visited the Lincoln Museum, you may recognize Darroch as the voice of Thomas in Ghosts of the Library. Living in the Midwest plays havoc with sinuses. Pollen in the spring, summer, and fall, and runny noses in the winter cause actors to have coughing fits or lose their voices altogether. For these reasons, as well as for vocal consistency, Darroch recorded the script, and the live actors simply lip-synced the text. As you will see today, Darroch is also an accomplished documentary film writer, producer, and director. Some of you may have already seen episodes he was involved with if you watched Moguls and Movie Stars, A History of Hollywood on Turner Classic Movies. When I learned about Darroch's recent documentary project, I knew we had to have him present it. It's an amazing story of how sons of privilege and wealth volunteered to serve their country, even before their country knew that their services would be needed. In the course of the story, some would make the ultimate sacrifice. Without giving away too much of the story, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Darroch Greer.
Thank you very much, Tom. It is really lovely to be here in the Midwest. I was born in Kansas, and your museum is really exceptional here. It's really quite wonderful. So thank you for coming out to see the film. In 2007, an old friend of mine from college saw a photograph of his grandfather on the cover of a book about World War I aviation, and he called me and asked me how to make a documentary. Ron King was the grandson of John Voorhees, Yale class of 1918, and a 10-term congressman from Ohio. That is John Voorhees on your far left over there. The book was, well, you'll see him here. He is in Palm Beach, Florida, sitting next to 6 of his Yale classmates, and this is in April 1917, and they have quit school with their parents' permission, and it was too cold to fly up in Long Island, where their first training session was, and so they've come down to Palm Beach. They were staying in the breakers for a little while as they got down there. And this is where they all finally got to solo and really started sort of figuring out how they were going to work together as a unit. They were known as the first Yale unit. They were, well, you'll see in the film. Anyway, they became the founding squadron of the Naval Air Reserve. Most of my historical work had been in 19th century America. I really knew nothing about World War I. They did not cover it at all in secondary school. So things started off when Ron, because of his grandfather, went to hear Mark Workman, the author of the Millionaire's Unit book, speak at the Yale Club in Manhattan. And there he met several relatives of the first Yale Unit families. And we sort of had the idea that there would be a lot of very interesting photographs, family photographs that had not been seen before in these collections, of some of whom were still, very blue blood, old money families in the Northeast. But the story looked very great. Young, dynamic guys who wanted to tackle a new and dangerous technology and running off to war at a time when war seemed very romantic. But several questions raised themselves immediately. How important were these guys? How did they fit into the context of naval aviation? What part did naval aviation have in World War I? And how could we tell this story in a dramatic and compelling way? Was there enough film and photographs to show it? I'm sorry, I'm not used to doing PowerPoint presentations, and I forgot to show you these. This is Skull and Bones, a very exclusive secret society in Yale. This is Di Gates and David S. Ingalls conferring in Palm Beach as they're learning to fly. So we wanted to figure out what we could claim as to their accomplishments. This is Robert Lovett, and we also wanted to know how we were going to pay for this documentary. So we started a nonprofit and started getting individual donations, got some money from some foundations. I started reading the Millionaire's Unit. In 1925, there was a 2-volume history written by the Davison family, the family who founded the unit. I started reading John Keegan and Martin Freeman, Barbara Tuchman, all the people that wrote about World War I, histories of naval aviators, books on World War I, how it worked, all to find the context of how these guys fit in. And I really came to believe that World War I was the most seminal event in American history next to the Civil War. It really sort of changed how we saw ourselves as a country. Our country went from being pretty much agrarian to being industrial, went from rural to urban, went from being really ruled by one class of people to a diverse culture. We started directing our resources and manpower overseas, and we became citizens of the world. When Europe collapsed in on itself after 4 years of fighting, the United States stepped into the void and to the fore, and we were now a world power. World War II was 5 times bigger in terms of casualties and resources, but it did not cause 3 empires to collapse. It did not redraw the map of Europe and the Middle East as drastically as World War I did. And it didn't redefine our modern lives as Americans. It really was World War I that forced America into the leadership position that it took on the world stage in the 20th century. So, how did the first Yale unit fit into this vast history? We didn't want to make them seem like they were doing more than they really were. But we started doing, than they really did, but we started doing interviews. We started collecting archival material, generic flying aviation footage, things like this. And we got $25,000, and we went to the Hudson River Valley to the old Rhinebeck Aerodrome, and we filmed some planes in one day, edited a little bit of footage together. In 2011, it was the centennial of naval aviation, and we started going around the country a little bit, showing little bits of our film to try and get people interested. We went to the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola. As we were doing interviews down there, we showed some at Yale, showed some in New York. And then I went to Europe for 5 weeks. I filmed in England and over the North Sea, in France and in Belgium. Oh, most of that will be covered in the film. The main thing that the Navy had to do was taking care of the threat of the German U-boat. The sinkings of all shipping going to Great Britain, where it was so drastic that the British Admiralty decided that they didn't have any more than 6 months more to last in the war. And it wasn't until the United States came in and the American Admiral Sims said we really need to go to convoy shipping, have all the ships go together, protect them, that we can really turn that around. There's a German U-boat. Stateside, the First Yale Unit had been training for 9 months and trying to get the Navy to recognize them, but the Navy really had no provision to recognize them without them being Navy members. And it wasn't until we were just about to go to war that finally a provision was passed, and the First Yale Unit was able to enlist as reservists. Aircraft pioneer Glenn Curtiss had been experimenting for quite a while how to fly planes on and off the water so that they didn't get in the way of battleship operations. And we were lucky enough to be able to film the only known replica of a flying boat. This is a replica of a 1913 Curtiss E-boat. 2 weeks before the United States declared war on Germany, the First Yale Unit was inducted into the Navy. They thought they would go to the front flying together as a unit, but since they were virtually the only flyers that really had any experience with aviation in the Navy, they were divided up stateside and overseas, training other pilots, flying experimental aircraft, building naval air stations. I'm not going to tell you any more about their exploits because it's all in the movie. Perhaps the most surprising thing I learned about World War I and World War I aviation was how little prepared the First Yale Unit was, how little prepared the Navy was, and how little prepared America was to engage in a war the size of World War I. The Navy just took a long time to recognize how flying boats could really be helpful to their command. I'm going to just say one more thing. As a writer and a documentary filmmaker, I really don't like seeing reenactments in documentaries. To me, seeing people run around in costumes really kills your imagination. And there was so much documentary evidence that I really felt that history could really tell the story. If we looked closely enough at the photographs we were gathering, the ephemera we were gathering, documents, we really could let history tell the story and not have to be dramatic about it. So these are some of the materials. That's a flight log, Truby Davison's passport, that really give a tactile feel for history, and that's really what I hope works. We were lucky enough to fall in with some practitioners of World War I aviation, people that build replica World War I planes, many of them with original engines. And we filmed them in California, in New York, and this is in New Zealand. I'll tell you about that afterwards. This is our crew flying with a helicopter. I had never even been up in a helicopter until we were filming with this. And we hope that through working with these planes that we've given a real visceral idea of what it took to fly these very new, flimsy, and yet very interesting machines. When the First Yale Unit started flying, it was only 13 years after the Wright brothers. And so it was quite an experience. Without further ado, the documentary, The Millionaires Unit. Thank you again for coming.
Lovett Airfield, and I wonder if there was any relationship to the Lovett mentioned there. I can't remember where this airfield is, but as soon as I heard his name, I went, oh, isn't there a Lovett Airfield?
I am afraid that I cannot answer that. That vaguely rings a bell, and I want to say that I don't think it is.
Okay.
But you might be
I
thinking
did
of
imagination.
You might be thinking of Love Field in Dallas.
Maybe that's it.
There's a Jim Lovett, also an astronaut.
Jim Lovell.
Lovell.
Is it Lovell?
Lovell.
Lovett?
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah. Robert Lovett is a very interesting character, though. There are some great stories about
No,
him.
sorry.
Oh, quite all right. Quite all right. Yes, sir.
Was Kenneth McLeish's brother Archibald? Is that Archibald McLeish?
Yes, Kenneth's brother was the first poet laureate, and I believe the librarian, Library of Congress, right, Tom?
Librarian of Congress.
Yeah, indeed, that was him. And one of our chapter headings, the coda, is titled "How Very Young We Were," and that is a line from one of his World War I poems. He wrote several poems for his brother. Yeah, there were 4 of them. By the way, our narrator, Bruce Dern, who is not really a professional narrator, but you probably know him as an actor, he is a grandnephew of Archibald and Kenneth McLeish, which is pretty much why we... Yeah, it was a real labor of love. I didn't think it would take 8 years. I thought it would maybe take 2.5 years. We'd put the film out, bring it back in, and then when 2014 rolled around, we'd have it back out for the beginning of the centennial. But so much for best laid plans. Yes, sir.
Yeah, very well done, very well done.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
What were the advantages or disadvantages of the biplane versus the triplane? You know?
The triplanes gave more lift, but and they could get off the ground faster. But the problem up there is visibility and seeing where your enemy is. And the visibility was very poor with the triplanes, even though the wings were not as wide. They were thinner. You know, you still had one down below, you know, one along here and one up there. And so visibility was a problem. The Sopwith triplane, I believe, was the very first triplane in World War I, and it performed well, but, and everybody tried it. It's funny that the Germans, because the Fokker company kept improving. Every 3 to 4 weeks they would have an improvement in their planes. And I don't know why at the end of the year, at the end of the war, in 1918, all of a sudden there were these Fokker triplanes, but I guess they seemed to like them. That's what the Red Baron is famous for flying, but he actually got most of his victories in an Albatross, which we had one in the scene where Di Gates gets shot down. It's kind of a bullet-shaped hull, and that was a good plane for them too.
Last question, what's going to happen to the film? History Channel?
We have been working with WNET, which is the New York PBS station, and they haven't figured out how to place it. PBS pretty much wants to wait till 2017 for the centennial of when America joins the war. And this film is sort of standing alone, and I proposed 3 other World War I documentaries, and they've been sort of sitting on the proposals, and I just heard that WGBH is now doing a World War I series, probably for 2017. So I'm trying to get WNET and maybe some of the other PBS stations to show it in 2016, which would be the centennial of the first Yale unit starting. But I'm going to Washington next month to show it at the GI Film Festival at the Naval Memorial, and I'm going to try and meet with National Geographic and Smithsonian and really see who wants to show it. You know, we're done with it, we want to get it out. But also we're making 3 or 4 10 to 12 minute supplementary films for the DVD, and hopefully that will be done this summer, and I hope the Herbert Hoover Library will sell it in their gift shop. But that remains to be seen as well. Yes, ma'am?
Will it be available for purchase at some point?
Yes, we hope to have the DVD for purchase later on this year, as soon as we can finish it. Yes, sir.
What do you estimate the total cost of the film?
It's funny, one of our advisors is Fred Roos, and he produced The Godfather and Apocalypse Now and a lot of things for Francis Ford Coppola. We met with him early on, described the film, and he said, oh, about $1 million. And we said, oh, no, $350,000 probably. And after 8 years, yeah, it was $1 million. Yeah. Which is part of why it took so long. You know, we had to raise the money as we went. Anything else? Well, yes, sir.
Are you in negotiations for a feature based on this? This would be a great movie in theaters.
I think it would be as well. And Mark Wertman, who wrote the book that inspired it, and I then went back and reread everything else and worked up the movie from a bunch of other sources. But Mark has become a very good friend of ours. But we couldn't afford to option his story for the film. And so we just signed a contract saying we don't have anything to do with each other, and he was happy to do an interview. But it was just way too expensive, and we couldn't afford it at the time. So the options are sitting out there, and I'm really hoping with our movie that people will see it and someone will option Mark's book. Yes, ma'am.
Why did it take you 8 years rather than 2.5?
It really was raising money. It just took a while. We had to get, nobody knew us as filmmakers. It took us a while to convince people that, we were in it for the long haul, and we would write quarterly newsletters and send them out, and then we'd put together a little bit of the film and go to New York and have these fundraising operations. But one of the producers on it, who is Tribby Davison's grandson, he's an investment banker in New York, and is very much one of those blue blood families. And he would say, well, call such and such foundation. And so I'd have to write them a letter and do a formal proposal, and then we'd have to wait 6 months till they met as a foundation to get the money. But one of the advantages in making documentary films when it takes a long time is that more material starts showing up and coming in, and you start to understand more about your story and can really do a better job. It's a much better film than it would have been had we only, had 2 years, which we probably could have done it in. But that's mostly why it took so long. Well, yes, ma'am.
I appreciate your decision to not have actors in uniform. I agree with your conclusion that there's enough authentic, original material to tell the story beautifully.
Yeah, it really makes a difference. When I see actors running around, I start thinking about their clothes and what they do for a day job. And, this is their weekend out on the battlefield, and it just gets away from me. Yeah, and the whole slow motion thing. So thank you for that.
Well, Bruce
Yes.
Stern did a marvelous job.
Oh, good.
Talking about actors and so forth, marvelous.
Yeah, he's rather eccentric as a narrator, but he was a great deal of fun to work with. He's really quite an interesting guy. And he has on his phone, he has a photograph of the McLeish home. And he grew up in the same bedroom that Kenny McLeish did. It's a house with 4 turrets, and all 4 of the sons, Archibald, Kenny, Nelson, and can't remember the 4th one, and Bruce, Bruce's grandfather, all had a room in these turrets. And Bruce Stern's turret was Kenny McLeish's turret. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your interest, and thank you.